Okay, we are good to go.
All right, thank you. Well, good afternoon and welcome everyone to the CPE June Finance Committee meeting. Thanks everyone who is in attendance and watching out there. I'm Eric Ferris, Vice Chair, and until Chair Menser is able to join us,
I'm here.
there he is. We're called to order and just getting ready for roll call, Luke. So
Perfect.
You made it just in time. I'll let Heather make the roll call and turn it over to you.
Sure.
Okay, wonderful. Mr. Colby Burks.
I'm here.
Dr. Kelly Ellis is at a Harvard Business Institute this week, so she's not able to join us. Mr. Eric Ferris.
Here.
Chair Luke Menser.
Here.
Mr. Richard Nelson. Mr. Madison Silvert.
Here.
And Miss Elaine Walker.
Yeah.
Right, you have a quorum.
All right. Excellent. So the next item on the agenda is the approval of the minutes. Those should all be in your onboard. Do we need a motion? I think we typically need a motion to approve the minutes. Do I have a motion?
Moved.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Ferris. Do I have a second?
Second.
All right. I saw the motion by Mr. Ferris. Who was the second? I didn't hear it.
Colby.
Colby. There you go. Excellent. All in favor of approving the minutes, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, like sign. Excellent. Motion passes. The next item on the agenda is the 22-23 Finance Committee dates. Heather, I didn't know if we want to share those. I know those have been provided via email. Does anybody have any questions on those dates as presented?
I do appreciate having those sent out in advance. It's very helpful.
Agreed.
Do you want me to have that shared out real quick?
What does I'll say, does anybody need to see them? Or is everybody good with them? Any questions?
All good. Thank you.
Okay. Heather, do we need a motion to approve those?
Yes, please.
Okay. So do I have a motion to approve the 22-23 committee meeting dates as previously provided?
So moved.
All right. Motion
Second.
by Ms. Walker, second by Mr. Silvert. All in favor indicate by saying aye.
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 All opposed, like sign. All right. Excellent. 2 down. Look at us. Easy peasy. All right. Now the next one is a little bit bigger topic. It's the campus tuition and fee proposals for academic year 22-23. So I will hand it over and we can walk through those. I believe that's going to Dr. Payne.
Thank you, Chairman, sir.
You're welcome.
We have actually all 9 institutions are going to be bringing campus tuition and fee proposals today for your review and endorsement. As you may, actually 8 institutions. Kctcs was approved at the last Finance Committee meeting. You also approved the undergraduate tuition and fee rates for Northern Kentucky University at the last meeting, and they're bringing their graduate school tuition and fee rates today for your endorsement. Sean, if you'll go ahead and pull up the PowerPoint, I'm going to turn it over to Sean McKiernan on my staff. He and Ryan Kappenberger did the heavy lifting in terms of reviewing all of these campus tuition and fee proposals and making sure that they meet council parameters. Sean, do you need me to do it?
Oh, I'm happy to do it. Can you see my screen? Is that pulled up? Okay, good. As a reminder, last May, the council adopted resident undergraduate tuition and fee ceilings for this past year and also for this upcoming year. The base rate increase was limited to 3% over 2 years, no more than 2% in any one year for the public universities. And the increase for the 2-year period was limited to $5 at Kctcs, no more than $3 per credit hour in any 1 year. Furthermore, institutions would be allowed to submit for approval non-resident undergraduate tuition and fees that comply with our policy or an existing memorandum of understanding between the council and an institution. And finally, market competitive tuition fee rates could be submitted by the institutions for our fourth council approval for graduate and online courses. So this next slide is University of Kentucky's proposal. You can see that in the notes there on the far right that the increase for last year was 1%, $126 increase for undergraduate resident students. The increase proposed for 22-23 was 2% or $249. This is in compliance with the policy. You can see that the graduate rates for resident students, 2%, 2.1% for non-resident students. So there's a look at the University of Kentucky, University of Louisville. You can see that last year the increase was 1.7% or $208. The proposed increase for this upcoming year is 1.2% or $150. And you can see that the increase for graduate, resident, non-resident students there, U of L's proposed rates comply with the council's approved ceilings. Eastern Kentucky University had a 2% increase last year. They're asking for a 1% increase for this upcoming year. You can see their graduate rate 1.1%. They're in compliance with the council policy. Their proposal is in compliance with the policy. Kentucky State University is on this next slide. They have no increase in resident undergraduate tuition. Last year, for this upcoming year, they've requested 1.8%, $154 for resident undergraduate students. You can see that the rate increases they proposed for non-resident undergraduate students and graduate students. Their rates comply with the council ceilings. Morehead State University, we're really flying through these, which is great. I'm all on board with that. Please stop me if you have any questions. $172 last year, or 1.9%. And for this upcoming year, they're requesting a $98 increase for resident undergraduate students for the year, or 1.1%. Morehead's rates comply with the council approved ceilings. You can see that their graduate rate has even been reduced slightly, $3 per credit hour. Murray State University last year they had a 0.9% increase. This upcoming year they've requested a 1.9% increase, and they're in compliance with council policy. They're moving to uniform graduate rate of $559.50 per credit hour, as you can see in the chart, the table. And Northern Kentucky University, as we mentioned, the council approved their rates on April 15th. For last year, they had a 1% increase, or $100 per student, resident undergraduate student. For this upcoming year, they've requested a 2% increase, or $196 per resident undergraduate student, 2% for non-resident students as well, and no increase for graduate students. Their rate proposed rates are within the council's guidelines. And Western Kentucky University, last year they had a 1.8% increase, or $190 for resident undergraduate students. This year they're proposing a 1.1% increase, or $120. That's within the council's guidelines. $10 per credit hour increase for graduate students, for resident graduate students and non-resident graduate students. Their proposed rates are within the council's guidelines. And so finally, in summary, the tuition and fee proposal submitted by all of the institutions comply with the council approved ceilings, as we mentioned, the NKU undergraduate resident and non-resident rates were approved April 15th, as were the Kctcs rates. As a reminder, the Kctcs had no increase last year, and the increase for this upcoming year was 1.7% or $3 per credit hour. And just as a reminder, their parameters were $5 over 2 years, and with no more than $3 per credit hour increase in any 1 year. So just a reminder as to where those rates fell. The non-resident online rates meet the council guidelines, and staff is happy to recommend that the Finance Committee endorse for full council approval tuition proposals for academic year 2022-23 as submitted by the institutions.
Thank you.
I know that was a lot of information.
Yeah, no, that's great. I think before discussion, we need a motion to approve these, and then we can have some discussion. So do I have a motion to approve the campus tuition and fee proposals?
Eric, I'll move.
Thank you, Mr. Ferris. Do I have a second?
Second, Elaine.
Thank you, Elaine. Now we can discuss. Any discussions or questions for Sean or Dr. Payne?
It's more of a curiosity than anything else. Some of these schools have a heavier reliance on campus housing because there isn't a lot of multifamily housing near campus. And so do we have any kind of feel of how housing fees, which isn't a part of this proposal, have or haven't been used to make up for increased tuition that isn't keeping up with inflation? Is that a tactic?
I'll jump in and respond to that, and then let President Thompson respond if he would like to as well. What we collect on an annual basis is what's reported by the institutions to the College Board. It's part of an annual tuition and fee survey, and they do collect room and board and book costs from all of the institutions as well. And we use that in order to provide us with comparative data. The limitation of the College Board data is that you're looking at an average of the room and board costs per institution. And so we have on our list of things to accomplish over the next 6 to 9 months, an in-depth look at the variation in housing and food costs on each of our campuses, and not just look at that average for each institution. And at the same time, we're going to look at how those costs have gone up over time. And we can look at how the average has gone up over time. But that's the average that's being reported by those institutions on that annual survey. And we need to go a little bit more in depth and really dig into that particular question. But that is an excellent question.
Yeah, because one of the things I'd be interested in knowing is if our 3% framework that we've established has pushed those costs to increase at a faster rate than they were before we created the 3% cap. That'd be an interesting thing to know.
And we'll have an answer to that question before the end of this calendar year.
Great. Thank you.
Any other questions? Okay. I will say, I know sometimes people will shy about asking questions in these, but this is definitely the time. If you do have questions after the meeting, you can submit those via email to myself, Dr. Thompson, or Bill Sean. They've always been very helpful on answering any questions that you want, but I do want to always reiterate every once in a while, don't be shy. If you have a question, or if you think someone else might have the same question, that's okay. And trust me, I've been on the council for many years. I've asked some dumb questions in the past, but they turned out it led somebody else to a question. So there you go. So don't be shy. Eric's laughing because he's witnessed a number of those questions. So we just want to make sure that everybody has all the information they need before they cast a vote. So with that said, so we have a motion by Mr. Ferris and a second by Ms. Walker. All in favor of approving the campus tuition and fee proposal indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, like sign. All right, the ayes have it. Thank you all very much. Moving on, next topic is the asset preservation pool. Go take it away.
What we're going to do, in addition to the asset preservation pool, CPE staff work with the Office of the State Budget Director staff. We work with campus officials. The state appropriated funding not only for asset preservation, but also for an endowment match program, also for Kctcs, a workforce development trust fund. And CPE staff has worked, as I said, with OSBD staff and campus officials to develop a set of guidelines for each of those programs. And we're going to share those with you today. Now, the guidelines are much more detailed than what I'm going to share with you in these slides. So I encourage you to read through those. Also, a lot of good information contained in your agenda items. But we thought it would be helpful if we could condense in just 4 or 5 slides what we felt salient information, the most important information Finance Committee members to be aware of. So in terms of the asset preservation pool guidelines, and you'll see this format, it's very similar for each of these sets of guidelines. You've got program funding, allocation of program funds, uses of program funds, areas of concentration, matching requirements. And so a lot of these different sections are very similar across the 3 sets of guidelines. And we always open up with program funding. So in terms of the asset preservation pool, the General Assembly authorized $683.5 million for a post-secondary education asset preservation pool for the upcoming biennium. The stated purpose of that pool is to provide funds for individual, and I underline the word individual, and we'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute, asset preservation, renovation, and maintenance projects at the public post-secondary institutions. In addition to the $683 million, the state appropriated $16.5 million for a standalone asset preservation project at Kctcs. Since that project is not part of the larger pool, it's not subject to the same matching requirements as the asset preservation pool funds. In total, the General Assembly authorized $700 million for asset preservation for the upcoming biennium. And that is the amount that CPE requested in its biennial budget submission. So we're very thankful to the governor and the General Assembly for funding the council's request in its entirety. In terms of the allocation of program funds, the General Assembly allocated the $683.5 million among institutions based on each institution's share of system total Category 1 and Category 2 school fees. And they appropriated half of the $683 million in the first year of the biennium and half in the second. And that's what you can see in the table on this slide. In terms of matching requirements, the budget bill specified that each project at the research campuses shall be matched at 30% funds provided by each research institution. That equates to a 30-cent institutional per state dollar match. Each project for the comprehensive institutions in Kctcs will be matched at 15% from provided by each comprehensive institution and Kctcs. That equates to a 15-cent campus contribution per state dollar. As you can see, their eligible sources of matching funds include cash, agency bonds, private funds, grants, or other institutional funds. And the budget bill also included agency bond authority for all of the universities that was the equivalent of those allocations you saw on the previous page. And it provided restricted funds authority for Kctcs. As you can see it in the very last bullet there, general fund appropriations cannot be used to match asset preservation pool funds. In terms of uses of funds, the budget bill indicated that the funds are to be used for individual asset preservation, renovation, and maintenance projects at the institutions, education in general, and state-owned and operated residential housing facilities. So it's no mistake that when you look at our guidelines, they basically state projects that preserve, renovate, or renew. E and G facilities are eligible to receive funds from the pool. Projects that preserve, renovate, or renew state-owned and operated residential housing facilities are eligible. And if the housing facility is owned by a university or one of its affiliated corporations, that is considered to be a state-owned project. The reason the term individual is important, well, Sean and I believe that the General Assembly did not want the campuses just to pool all of their asset preservation projects and submit it for one lump sum reimbursement. They want to see those individual projects that are being financed with these funds. And you'll see that the process that we've developed, working in collaboration with the institutions, will allow us to do that. As you can see it in the next bullet, expenditures made after April 15th of this year can be used to meet state matching requirements. April 15th is the date of the that the budget of the Commonwealth was enacted. Routine maintenance and repair projects and ongoing M&O costs are not eligible. Are there any questions to this point? Please feel free to jump in at any time with any questions. We want to make sure that folks understand this.
So Bill, I just want to verify, these are for projects that are for repairing roofs or upgrading various systems, operational systems, not for maintenance or new construction.
Yeah, they can't be used for new construction. And M&O costs, which is a janitorial services and minor repairs that are typically funded in an institution's operating budget, we're saying that those are not eligible either. We want institutions to go ahead and replace their roofs, replace their windows, replace plumbing, electrical, or HVAC systems, because that's what that BFA study that was conducted back in 2007 and then updated in 2013 basically was saying that, you know, most of our facilities are over 30 years old and their condition is consistent with their age. And so we really do need to make some headway on some major asset preservation projects. But yes, what you just said is absolutely correct. We were informed by the state budget office early on as we were developing these guidelines that they very much would prefer to use an expenditure and reimbursement approach to distribute these funds. And specifically what that means is institutions will be required to expend their own funds for eligible projects and then seek reimbursement from the state. So as campuses make these expenditures, they can submit certification letters to CPE and to OSBD that contain a list of expenditures by projects. And the reason we need that list of expenditures by project is we need to be able to know for each project which buildings are associated with that project, and are they E&G buildings or are they residential housing facilities that are owned by that institution. And that's what allows us to determine that the expenditures are eligible. At any rate, me and my staff will review those requests and use our comprehensive database, the capital project part of that database to verify that these project expenditures are eligible for reimbursement. And we'll let OSBD staff know that. We are asking the institutions to provide us with information on the front end to identify these projects. We're asking before they come to us or to OSBD seeking reimbursement that they go ahead on the front end and submit a list of projects that they plan to initiate or perhaps they already initiated to CPE so that we can check that against our capital database and make sure that the projects that they're wanting to submit for reimbursement are going to be eligible before they even undertake the project. And as you can see in that first bullet, we're allowing the institutions flexibility in terms of the timing of submitting those project plans. But we've indicated to the institutions that if you submit those plans early, we can go ahead even before you take those projects before your board for approval and let you know that those indeed meet the council's criteria and are eligible. As you can see in the next bullet, we're requiring that projects that meet or exceed the $1 million threshold for construction or $200 million threshold for an item of equipment to be approved by the institution governing board. And most institutions already have thresholds that, they have to take projects before their board for their approval. And as I indicated already in that last bullet, we will review the project lists and certify to the institutions on the front end that their projects are going to be eligible for reimbursement. And by having this initial step, by the time they actually expend the funds and submit their reimbursement request, we already know which projects they plan to undertake and have already signed off that they will be eligible to receive.
I'm just curious, with the April 15th trigger date for expenditures, have we gotten any indication, have we received any information from institutions presenting projects already?
I have not, and the funds actually aren't going to be available until beginning July 1. Sean, have you?
There have been a few institutions that have some expenditures that we're playing catch up to some extent. So I've heard of a few projects that will be coming through as soon as these guidelines are adopted. And as Bill mentioned, the funding isn't available until July 1st, but they can use their expenditures between April 15th and June 30th as match. So they will get essentially some reimbursement next year. They'll get credit for it.
And Sean, the two projects that Kctcs is bringing for Finance Committee approval today, those are asset preservation projects, correct?
They are.
Okay.
And they can count those as a match, but only if ultimately their projects get approved, correct?
Of course, yeah.
We touched on this on one of the earlier slides, so I'm not going to go through this in a lot of detail, but as institutions incur expenses, they can submit those requests to the council. We do want the certification letters to identify project expenditures made during the request period, whatever they determine that request period to be. And we want them to identify the amount of state funds that they're requesting and the amount of campus matching funds that they've contributed to the project. The timing of those requests is flexible, but we are encouraging the institutions to accumulate their expenditures and submit no more than one request per month. And of course, once we receive those certification letters, OSBD is going to receive them at the same time that we do. We will review the request, compare those to our comprehensive database, and certify to OSBD that those expenditures are eligible for reimbursement. So in terms of staff's recommendation, what you need to know, I've already said this, we work with campus officials and OSBD staff to develop a process, number one, for identifying eligible projects, number two, for certifying expenditures on those projects, and then number three, a process for requesting reimbursement. And all three of those things are supported by all stakeholders that help to provide input to these guidelines. So staff is recommending that the Finance Committee endorse for full council approval the 2022-24 Asset Preservation Pool guidelines. One other thing that's included in this agenda item, and we've got a second recommendation in that regard. In the enacted budget, there was language stipulating that any capital projects funded from the asset preservation pool are already authorized by the General Assembly. So the projects are already approved. They did ask if a project exceeded the threshold of $1 million for construction, to $200,000 for a piece of equipment, that the project be reported to the Capital Project Bond Oversight Committee. Staff is recommending, since these projects have already been approved by the General Assembly, we're recommending that the Finance Committee and the Council delegate to staff the authority to approve capital projects funded from this pool, because they are already approved by the General Assembly. So does anyone have any questions? And that latter point will also help us to expedite, reviewing and recommending disbursement of funds as institutions seek reimbursement, because they won't have to come back before the council and get a project approved. I think, as most of you know, if an institution provides a list of projects as part of the biennial budget submission that the council makes to the governor and the General Assembly, if a project is in that list, the council has already approved it when we make our biennial budget submission. If a project is not in that list and it exceeds, the capital project threshold, we come back to the council for interim capital approval. And indeed, that's what we're doing for the 2 Kctcs projects that we're bringing to you today. The problem is that if we have to wait, every 2 months for the next Finance Committee meeting and the next council meeting, institutions might be making expenditures on projects and not be able to get before the council in a timely manner in order to go ahead and get those projects approved and get started on the projects and begin seeking reimbursement on their expenditures. So that's the purpose for our request to provide us with that authority to approve those capital projects on your behalf.
All right, the chair has had to step away, so I'm back up again and open it up to any questions for Bill or Sean on these 2 recommendations. Hearing none, may I have a motion to adopt the staff recommendation that the Finance Committee endorse full council approval of the 22-24 asset preservation pool guidelines?
Motion.
And a second, please. That was Colby, I believe.
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you. Elaine is the second. Any other discussion? If not, all those in favor of the motion, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Nay. All right, adopted. Next, a motion, please, to adopt the staff recommendation that the Finance Committee and council delegate to the staff the authority to approve the capital projects funded from the pool.
So moved.
Motion by Ms. Walker. Second.
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Burks. Any questions? Hearing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
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 And opposed, nay. All right, both adopted. Bill, thank you for the explanation, presentation. Next item, endowment match program guidelines.
The enacted biennial budget of the Commonwealth authorized $40 million in state bond funds for Bucks for Brains. Of that amount, $30 million was appropriated to the Research Challenge Trust Fund. $10 million was appropriated to the Comprehensive University Excellence Trust Fund. For those of you that might not know, the Research Challenge Trust Fund is for our 2 research campuses, University of Kentucky, University of Louisville, and of course, Comprehensive University Excellence Trust Fund is a trust fund that supports our comprehensive universities. And as we'll see when we get to the next set of guidelines, the Workforce Development Trust Fund guidelines. I'm sorry, what, Sean?
Your microphone is probably getting
Feedback? Okay, thank you. Sean was informing me that my microphone might be getting some feedback. At any rate, 10 million was appropriated to Comprehensive University Excellence Trust Fund. And as you'll see in a minute, the Workforce Development Trust Fund was created to provide incentive funding for Kctcs. The appropriation to the Research Challenge Trust Fund will be allocated 2/3 to the University of Kentucky and 1/3 to the University of Louisville as required in statute. And you can see the resulting allocation of funds in the table at the bottom of this slide. 20 million for the University of Kentucky, 10 million for the University of Louisville. $10 million appropriation to the Comprehensive University Excellence Trust Fund allocated among comprehensive universities based on each institution's share of total general fund, excluding debt service and specialized non-instructional programs, or what we refer to as mandated programs. And that's a statutory requirement as well. And you can see the citation there. And you can see the resulting allocation of the $10 million among our 6 comprehensive universities. In terms of matching requirements, the endowment match program was conceived as a way to bring new money from external sources into our system of post-secondary education in Kentucky. In order to access state funds, universities must acquire and document dollar-for-dollar matching funds that are newly generated and are from external sources. And you can see what we mean by external sources listed there. All funds, both state and private source funds, must be endowed. In terms of uses of program funds, and I'm going to spend just a minute on this slide because there's uses of funds requirement in addition to the uses of funds listed on the left. The council guidelines allow the institutions to use these funds for endowed chairs, professorships, research scholars, research staff and infrastructure, graduate fellowships and undergraduate scholarships, and mission support activities. There's something called the 70% rule. And if you look in the middle of this slide, the research universities are held to that 70% rule, which in the guidelines states that 70% of the funds have to be endowed in support of endowed chairs, professorships, or research scholars, or research staff and infrastructure that supports endowed chairs, professors, or research scholars. The other 30% of program funds at the research campuses can be used to support graduate fellowships and mission support activities. At the comprehensive universities, there's a 50% rule, and it basically states that 50% of program funds have to be endowed to support endowed chairs, professorships, or research staff and infrastructure that support those endowed chairs and professorships. Our comprehensive universities do not have research scholars. Those are faculty that are in a medical field that are on a tenure track at UK and U of L. The other 50% of comprehensive university program funds can be used for graduate fellowships, undergraduate scholarships, or mission support activities. And these rules were put in place, after an audit report back in 2003 came out and said that the Council on Post-Secondary Education was not making sure that the universities were targeting these funds for endowed chairs and endowed professorships. And so these rules were put into place to make sure that the lion's share of the funding would support endowed chairs and endowed professors. In terms of areas of concentration, those have changed every biennium since this program has been in existence. This is the 5th round of funding for the Bucks for Brains program. The enacted budget included language that you can see there. Program funds must support efforts to grow endowments for initiatives in the fields of science, technology, engineering, mathematics, and health. Toward that end, in the guidelines that we're proposing today, there's a bullet that says that both research and comprehensive universities, 100% of program funds must be endowed to support initiatives in the STEM plus H fields. Staff's recommendation. Well, let me provide a little information before I give you the recommendation. Again, council staff worked with campus officials. We reviewed the 2008-10 version of the endowment match program guidelines. That's the fourth round of funding for the program was in 2008-10. And we worked collaboratively to identify any proposed changes for 2022-24. The only significant change was eliminating the option to use program funds to finance capital projects. The 2008-10 budget bill, House Bill 406, had included language which allowed the research campuses and comprehensive universities to use Bucks for Brains funds to finance capital projects. There was no such language included in House Bill 1, the 2022-24 budget bill. We've already talked about the change with respect to 100% of the funds being used in the STEM plus H disciplines. Other than those two changes, there were no other substantive changes either to the use of funds section or to the process for request submission and approval. And CPE staff and campus officials support the endowment match program guidelines as presented. So now I'll get to staff's recommendation. We recommend that the Finance Committee endorse for full council approval the 2022-24 endowment match program guidelines.
Thank you, Bill. A reminder to everybody that all the members, if you don't mind, when we do vote, if you'll make sure to unmute and also make sure your video is on so that we can record that properly and avoid a roll call. Thank you so much. All right, on endowment match, any questions for Bill? All right, and do we have a motion to adopt staff recommendation for the guidelines to the full council, please?
So moved.
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Silbert, second by Mr. Burks, I think.
Yes, sir.
All right, discussion, questions? If not, all those in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
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 Opposed, nay. All right, hearing none, it's adopted. Thank you very much. Next item, interim capital project approval.
We have one more set of guidelines.
Where would we be without rules? I think one of the things we need to do is use some of this asset preservation money to fix your air conditioner bill. I think it's just a little loud.
I've got a fan in here. Do you think that's what it is? Let me
I
turn
don't
the
want
fan.
I don't want you to sweat.
Well, yeah, what would you do without guidelines? I'm telling you, but you know, this is what Bill does well, right?
Yeah, the one thing, right? Does that help? I just turned the fan off.
Yes, it just was making your microphone cut in and out, and I'm the last one to want you uncomfortable.
Okay, well, the next item on the agenda is the Workforce Development Trust Fund guidelines. And for some reason, it's not.
Bill, I had to start sharing for you. So you just tell me when you want to go to the next slide.
Yeah, next slide, Heather. In the enacted budget of the Commonwealth, the General Assembly appropriated $2,225,000 in the first year of the biennium for the Workforce Development Trust Fund. As you can see in that second bullet, the purpose of those funds was to increase credential production capacity for identified supply gaps. And when they say supply gaps, they mean workforce supply gaps, and support program offerings in targeted industry sectors. Just as a reminder, the council did recommend an additional $4.5 million in the second year of the biennium as part of its budget submission, but the General Assembly chose not to provide funding for the program in that second year. So this means the funds are non-recurring. Next slide, Heather. In terms of the allocation of program funds, CPE staff worked with Kctcs officials and agreed on a process that would allow Kctcs to use an application and proposal process internal to their system office to determine how those funds would be allocated among the 16 community and technical colleges. And as you can see in that first line there, system office staff will work with campus officials to determine that allocation. And the way that they're going to work together is in that bullet, second bullet down. They're going to put together a selection committee comprised of 5 chief academic officers from the colleges, 2 system office staff, and the Kctcs chancellor are going to review applications received from each of the colleges that want to access Workforce Development Trust Fund appropriations. The committee will then recommend to the Kctcs president funding of those applications that it believes meet the council's guidelines. Upon approval by the Kctcs president, final projects by college and by program, because there could be multiple programs at one college. Those will be submitted for review and approval by CPE staff. Next slide, Heather. In terms of the uses of funds, that was pretty clear in the budget bill. The funds are to be used to increase credential production capacity in those targeted industry sectors. And so in terms of the bullets that we put in the guidelines, here are just a handful of the ones that we felt were the most important. Funds will be used to establish new programs or expand existing programs in academic disciplines that address identified supply gaps in those targeted industry sectors. And we'll get to those targeted industry sectors here in a moment. The funds can be used to support new faculty positions, salary supplements to existing faculty positions, and associated expenses as permitted by Kctcs policy. The funds can also be used to purchase equipment and supplies, support new curriculum development, or to defray marketing expenses in those identified academic disciplines. Next slide, Heather. Here are the areas of concentration. And as you may recall, as part of the biennial budget development process before the council submitted its budget request to the Governor and General Assembly, Kctcs had submitted a competitive workforce initiative to the council, and they identified these 5 targeted industry sectors: healthcare, advanced manufacturing, transportation and logistics, business services and information technology, and construction and trades. And the reason that they had identified these areas as areas where there were workforce shortages, they used the KY stat projected annual job demand numbers, compared that to the number of Kctcs graduates in those fields that aligned, with those projected job openings, and the graduates from the year 2020, 2021. And they realized that there were workforce supply gaps in these areas. And so the General Assembly picked up on that language from their competitive workforce initiative and from the council's biennial budget request, and included that language in the budget bill. So the funds have to be used in these specific targeted industry sectors. Next slide, Heather. I think many of you already know this, but the council has statutory authority to determine the criteria and process by which Kctcs may submit an application to access the Workforce Development Trust Fund appropriations. Here is the request submission process as it's going to operate from council staff's perspective. Kctcs is going to use their own internal process to identify proposals that they think will qualify for a distribution from the trust fund. Once their president has approved those proposals, they will submit those funding requests to the council. And we're asking that they go ahead and submit the application forms from each of the individual colleges, along with supporting documentation. The supporting documentation is going to include planned program expenditures, anticipated impact on student enrollment and credential production, and identifying the workforce shortage areas that will be addressed. And CPE staff will approve requests that have been endorsed by the selection committee, approved by the president of Kctcs, and meet the council's eligibility requirements. Next slide, Heather. Lastly, and I think I've said this already, we work collaboratively with campus officials to determine the process for allocating funds among Kctcs institutions, to identify eligible and appropriate uses of workforce funds, to specify the targeted areas of concentration, and to develop the process for request submission, approval, and distribution of program funds. The guidelines are supported by both CPE staff and Kctcs officials. So staff recommends that the Finance Committee endorse for full council approval the attached 2022-24 Workforce Development Trust Fund guidelines.
Thank you, Bill. Is it safe to say that there might be an effort to use these funds in, say, far eastern or western Kentucky to help replace coal jobs and that sort of thing? I mean, is that the type of maybe indirect result we'd see from this?
The funds could certainly be used for that purpose, and colleges in that region would have to submit a proposal along those lines, and it would have to be selected by the selection committee, Kctcs selection committee. We have encouraged in the guidelines, and I didn't put this in the slides, but we've encouraged Kctcs in the guidelines to focus on the most pressing areas of workforce shortage need, and to focus on those areas that provide the highest and best return on investment.
Well, Eric, Bill, are you done? I'm sorry, finish up. I apologize.
Yeah, I'm done.
Okay. Eric, well, just to let you know, the answer is yes. We are working with Kctcs in areas such as Southeast Community College, Hazard, some of those other areas, to really focus on reskilling, allow those people toward the needed jobs in that area. So if that's what you're asking, the answer is absolutely yes. And so that's really important when we think about the displaced minors, focusing on much of the technology areas, such as coding and a variety of those other things. So yes, these monies will be really targeted in these community colleges to develop what's needed in the community, especially as it moves toward these sectors and as it moves toward actually getting more people with a credential that matters. Is that the question you were asking?
Yeah, I wondered if it would have that benefit, the construction and trades, the transportation, logistics, those kinds of things that might lend themselves. And of course, you were just talking about technology, coding, and so forth.
Yeah, it will indeed. And all of those things you just mentioned falls within that. As a matter of fact, they can come back and say, well, there's something that may not fit neatly into this. I don't know what that would be. And say, but it is a needed area in this particular region. And then it could be acceptable for that. Yes.
Are we seeing any specialized skills, training needed for these new automotive electric battery plants that are being constructed?
Absolutely. And Rick's on here and give you more detail, but what has happened was they gave Kctcs some more money to work with that hardened factory. And there's going to be a lot of small industry folks popping up around there. So this is really new technology. It's going, Kctcs will be working, and actually Rick can tell you they're asking for your institutions also, will be working directly with Ford and those subsidiary or those pop-up, facilities to work exactly on that. Rick, was there something else you want to add to that?
No, you're exactly right, Dr. Thompson. I'll just add that Ford's working, actually, we just had a meeting yesterday with Ford and what's called their governance committee. They're working with Elizabethtown Community College, the rest of the community college, and bringing the 4 years in to have that discussion to make sure that that their workers that they will need are trained up. So once they're ready to open, they kind of hit the ground running. But that is something the ACTC actually will be providing a training facility, working with them to create a training facility. So we are working very closely with them.
All right, great, thank you. Any other questions? Do we have a motion to adopt for recommendation the Workforce Development Trust Fund guidelines?
So moved.
Ms. Walker moves. Seconds.
Second.
Mr. Burks, thank you, sir. Motion second. Any other discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. And all, Madison, are you in there? All good. Okay. Any opposed, say nay. All right, very good. And Chair Menser is back. We are ready for to move to the
Capital project approval.
yes. Thank you very
Perfect.
much.
Thank you, Mr. Ferris, for covering. My apologies. I did need to step away for just a small moment. Unfortunately, I had to yell at some folks for a missed delivery. So that was always fun. All right. Next up is the capital project approvals. So the interim capital project approvals. I'll hand it right away over. Take it away.
We have two projects, both at Kctcs for your consideration and endorsement onto the full council for their approval. Both of these projects are asset preservation pool projects, and so they will take advantage of the 15 cents to the state dollar match leverage there. The first project is a $2 million total scope project at Southeast Kentucky Community and Technical College for mechanical equipment and upgrades. So that's $1.7 million in asset preservation pool funds and about $300,000 in campus funds. This project would upgrade and replace boilers, chillers, pumps, and air handlers, and then also update, likely replace HVAC controls on that campus as well. And then $1.5 million total scope project at Madisonville Community College, new roof for the Glenmar Center for the Arts there in Madisonville. That's a part of the community college campus. $1.3 million in asset preservation pool funds and about $200,000 in campus funds. These projects were approved by Kctcs board on June 10th. We have Andy Casebeer from Kctcs, who's very familiar with these projects. Andy, do you have anything to add at this time about these projects? You might be stepped away. Oh, there he is.
No, sorry, it wouldn't unmute. Yeah, both of these projects have been in the planning stages for some time. We starting with the Madisonville Community College, we expected it to actually be under $1 million in scope, but because of current market conditions and then also some issues that we found during design that's going to cause some extraordinary detailing on that building, it's now creeped up over $1 million. At Southeast Community College, those upgrades are on multiple campuses, multiple buildings. We have had a study going on for some time, and this identifies critical pieces of equipment and upgrades that we need to do in order to continue our efforts in energy conservation and to provide, proper environment for teaching.
And just so you know, members of the council, in the future, interim asset preservation pool projects can be approved by council staff, and we will report those as they are approved. And that will just help this process move along quicker. But because Kctcs asked for these projects to be approved today, and just wanted to make sure that they were had all the proper approvals, they went ahead and asked us to have the council approve them at Finance Committee and then the council at Friday's meeting. Is there another slide on these projects? Staff recommends that the council endorse for full council approval these two capital projects at Kctcs.
Excellent. All right. I believe we need a motion for discussion. So do we have a motion for the approval of the interim capital project approval?
Move to approve.
All right. Motion by Mr. Silver. Do we have a second?
Second. There's Richard.
Second
Oh,
by
there he
Mr.
is. I
Nelson.
could barely hear him. Oh, excellent. Thanks, Richard. All right. Any discussion? Any questions? No questions, comments? Sean, is there anything else that we need to know? Anything that out of the ordinary or anything like that? Seems
Not
pretty
at all.
straightforward.
Glad to see some of these asset preservation capital projects are taking off.
Yeah. It's been a bit. So, all right. Hearing no questions or discussion, all in favor of approval, the interim capital project approval, indicate by saying aye.
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 All opposed, like sign. All right, motion carries. Thank you very much. Next item on the agenda is the Kentucky State University funding distribution disbursement request. Who's going to take that one? Is Travis?
Travis Powell, Greg Rush, or either one of you on the call?
I see
Yeah,
Travis.
Bill, I'm here.
There he is. Go for it.
Thanks, Luke. So what you have in front of you is the final request for the KSU disbursement of the $23 million that was awarded per House Bill 250. I won't go over all the details as you have seen the information in your materials from the request. This request was adopted by the KSU Board of Regents at one of their, not their last meeting, but the meeting before last, which occurred last week. As you'll recall, in the last instance, the board, due to the urgent nature of the funds being transferred, the board was not able to review because the new board being appointed before your last meeting, but they actually have had a chance to look at that one and then also have taken action to approve this request. It is for the remainder of the amount left, which is $5.5 million. The biggest chunk of that, as you'll see, is the payroll and the end of year expenses. There's a couple other items on there as well. You'll see the $1.4 million that will be designed to go to cash reserve. That's really just since, as we know, KSU had no cash reserve. This will give them a little bit of a cushion to move forward into the next year to help cover cash flow issues as they move forward into the next fiscal year, and also to pay for any closeout items that were maybe missed in the year-end expenses projections. So council staff supports this request. Just to note that this is a loan, so ultimately KSU will be responsible for repaying this. It's a no interest loan. CPE at a point in the future will make a determination on the repayment terms. But this is a loan that will begin to be repaid back in about 3 years. So if you have any questions, Greg's on the line and I'd be happy to answer them as well.
Okay. Any questions?
Nothing specific. I guess my question is, how do you see things going at Kentucky State now in terms of the leadership and moving forward?
Well, just give you an update. Currently, they're in the process of selecting a new interim president. As you'll recall from the legislation, they were required to choose a new interim president and cannot move forward with selecting a new permanent president until April of next year. They have engaged with a firm called the Registry, which is a group that takes mostly retired higher education professionals, vets them on the front end. They become members, and then once they're a member, an institution can engage the registry and pull from its membership. It can make recommendations of those individuals to their clients. The registry is paid per a percentage of their members, of the salaries that they receive, and so they have engaged with the registry. They came out of closed session and reviewed candidates in the last meeting. They're going to interview, I think, 3 to 4 candidates and should have someone selected, hopefully by the end of the month. So that's where they are in the presidential selection process. Otherwise, we're doing our very best to work with folks there and try to get the information that we need. There are challenges at times, but we're working through those, and we're still confident that we can meet all the markers that we've identified. I think the first report that was submitted for the KSU Management Improvement Plan update was submitted on June 1st, and you all have probably, I think, have already been provided a copy of that document. If not, it's in your board. It should be in your board materials for the full board meeting on Friday. So we're moving right along with the things that we need to do per the legislation.
So Travis is absolutely correct. The one thing I would add is there's a lot to do, Elaine. I mean, for me not to say that would be a lie. There's a lot to do, a lot of if you look at what HB 250 calls for, or 150, what 250, I can't even remember anymore. Calls for, it's a lot. It's interesting with CPE being in the role that we're in. We have to figure out how to work through all the processes of working with a brand new board, working with a staff that's been somewhat depleted, and so on. So this is not going to be an easy trip for us. And for me not to say that would be a lie. But I will give Travis and Greg a whole lot of compliments here. They are working on it big time. We've targeted a couple more people to work with us, which is good to make that happen. It's going to probably take out even more time than we originally thought, but thank goodness the legislature provided us with some resources to do that. So that's probably the rest of the update.
Thank you.
I'm curious, the $5.5 million that hasn't been dispersed yet, where is that money right now? Is it in an interest-bearing account of any kind? Is it a disbursement that comes from the state and flows through us? And
that's correct. Greg, you can add, but I mean, it's sitting at the Office of State Budget Director. And so they're waiting on us to give the approval to transfer the funds to KSU.
Okay.
Some of them actually don't get transferred. That, like, for example, the capital construction accounts that get reimbursed, they just do that directly, but they're still waiting on our, authority to do those things.
Yeah,
Greg's not saying anything, so I must have got
it's always one of those, how much do we need in the budget? Well, amazingly, exactly how much is left.
Yeah.
And so the other side of that is, I'm sure they need more than that $5.5 million.
They do, and we have the 10, the $5 million next year and the 10 million in the following year, fiscal year too. I mean, they do. Again, I think the thing to remember here is, again, number one, it's a loan, but number two is, I mean, if not for receiving the funds that you all approved in April, they would have had an issue making payroll. I mean, they really
Right.
don't have anything. And so, just to make the money flow work, they need a little bit in reserve in order to manage that. I mean, that and 1.4 million obviously is a small amount, and some of that may end up being used again for closeout items as well. So, yeah, I mean, they are using the whole amount, but like you said, they need it. So.
Yeah. And I'll add one more thing. A couple of things in their cash balance have to be reserved for future years. They're not expendable. They're land grant match, their asset preservation funds from their asset preservation fee. So those things have to be set aside and can't be touched for operations, which is another part of and that was a problem in the past. That's part of the reason the 23 million developed the way it did. And so the 1.4 that Travis is talking about is essentially money they could use next year for operations. And to your point about it being exactly what's left, when the 23 million was initially estimated and provided the General Assembly, that was our estimate of what it would take to essentially take them to zero this year. They have done, because that's all, frankly, the legislature was willing to do. And that's, they have actually done slightly better than that, we think, until, there's still not a great process in place for tracking some things, but it's getting better. But it does look like they've done about $1 million better than we thought. But again, it's not really it's not a sufficient reserve to carry into the next year.
Well,
So,
and they've lost some folks too,
Yeah,
and that has helped. And some of those, obviously they need them to make the budget balance, but some of those are critical positions too, that they're probably going to have to hire back at some point as well. But, for this year, that does help with the numbers too. So
I just want to remind this committee, and you already know this, I'm repeating myself, Bill Payne, I'm sounding like you, but that this 5 million next year and the 5 million this coming year and the 10 million afterwards really will be up to our discretion a lot based on building innovation. We will use that in its strictest sense, by the way, as building innovation for the thriving of the campus. It will not be built as a pure operational item. This is designed to be strategic. It's designed to be focused. It's designed to build overall enrollment. It's designed to build programmatic innovation. It's designed to do all those things. And as long as I'm in this position, I will make sure that that money will be done in that fashion. So there's a lot, once again, a whole lot of balls up in the air that's falling fast, to be honest with you. And we're trying to keep them at least caught, if not back up in the air. So in a nutshell, it is where we're at.
Okay. Any other thoughts or questions? Now, Travis, there's not a motion in there to approve anything, or is it the approval of the request?
should be, yes.
Okay. All right. Just making sure.
Mhm.
Any questions on that before we get a motion? Okay. So we have a motion for the KSU funding disbursement request. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Mr. Ferris, do I have a second? Second, Mr. Burks. Any further questions? All right. All in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, like sign. Excellent. Motion carries. Thank
you
you all
all.
very much. Thank you, Travis. Thank you, Greg, for all your hard work. That is not easy stuff. And you, Dr. Thompson. All for all the folks on the committee, there's a whole iceberg worth of work behind that. So that is very much appreciated. So, and thank you for all the folks at KSU. I know if any of them are listening or they watch this, we know that it is it's been a lot of hard work, but it's useful, it's fruitful, hopefully. All right. I don't have any other business on the agenda, so I'll open the floor. Any other last comments, questions? Dr. Thompson, any last things that we need to know?
Just a couple of quick things. First of all, I heard y'all mention, I may be able to answer something earlier. The governor's office called at the same time the meeting started, and not that I don't think y'all are important, you are, but I thought I'd better answer that call. So I'm happy if there are any questions that I may have missed, Mr. Chair, happy to answer. The one item I will tell you in this finance committee, this is the last one officially of this year. I'm proud to say that finances of CPE agency has been one that was, and we can obviously show you probably already know, has been one that we judiciously took care of. We did well. We have fewer positions, but we have more focused positions. We've got top-notch people we brought in, and we pay them okay in those roles versus trying to hire 3 people that may not be of equal caliber. Proud to say that we're coming at the end of the year, as Bill can attest, with an under budget. We're going to try not to be too far under, but not an over budget. And we've done everything we needed to. The accomplishments that y'all have already seen we had from last year as this committee approved our budget. I don't have enough to say just how much over we went and the outcomes that are good, not the dollars, but the outcomes. So I wanted to tell this committee, and I'll thank my staff openly on this. I appreciate the work they did. Believe it or not, they even let me have a vacation here in the process and didn't create too much hassle when I was gone. So a great job that they did, Mr. Chair and committee. Just wanted to give a final report on our budget at the CPE budget. It was one that was solid, one that was good, and the outcomes were greater than what we originally told you that we were going to do with it, in a nutshell. And happy to show you all that in numbers, as Bill will be
Fantastic.
happy.
Yes, yes.
Yes, I can go get those numbers right now if you guys would like to hang on.
Maybe over bourbons on Thursday. Well, folks, I appreciate everyone's time. Thank you all, and thank you all the folks on the staff for making this this meeting and all the meetings go smoothly. We do greatly appreciate it. And I'll entertain a motion to approve or to adjourn.
I'll move.
All right, motion by Mr. Nelson. All in favor? You can close your Zoom windows.
So
We'll see you guys this week.
week.
Absolutely. Look forward to it.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.